Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to discuss now that we've had a lower low, what now, right? What now? What happens now? If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, we've been covering this scenario for a while, and namely this scenario as we've been discussing over the last few weeks, we talked about, there being a lower low risk, okay, namely from getting rejected off the 200-day moving average. You usually come back down and ultimately put in a lower low. And that's actually what has happened now. So now that actually transpired, I want to talk about the implications of that. All right, so this one did prove correct. Certainly not everything I say proves correct, so I'm not trying to give that impression. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. But the thing is we've seen these, we've seen this type of move here where you have a low, a higher low, a rejection off the 200-day, a sort of pathetic little bounce for a couple of weeks, and then a lower low. And then ultimately, we actually, in 2018, we came back up and put in another move on that trend line. Now, after I get through this, I'm going to talk about, one thing to still keep us somewhat cautious, but I first want to talk about this scenario here. So this is what played out in 2018, and it was because of this scenario that we said a lower low is likely coming. And sure enough, a lower low did in fact come. And you can see a very similar pattern, right? You have a low, okay, you have a low, a higher low, a rejection off the 200-day, playing in the sandbox for a little bit, trying to hold the lower low, and then ultimately a capitulation below, right? So it played out in the exact same way. And even back then, we said it's the same story. Like the same story, it seems like it's being told again. And we need to recognize that. And we need to say, you know what? While we might not like the bearish side of things, we need to understand that a lower low could happen. And if it happens, it changes the market structure completely. Okay? So then what now? So I'm going to talk about that in this video. So there are two sort of things that I see right now. And one of those is continuing to play out like 2018. All right? And so basically what this looked like back in 2018 was that after we went down and technically put in a lower low, we actually bounced back up to the 200-day moving average. But the bounce back to the 200-day SMA from the first one over here occurred approximately 2 to 3 months later. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. It was 2 to 3 months later until we got back to the 200-day moving average. So with that in mind, one of the things you should consider is that a move back to the 200-day moving average, this one occurred back in late March. So if it were to take, say, like 80 days to get back up there, you're talking about not getting back up there until another month, at least another month. And I would say we'd be lucky to get there in only a month because of how far we've fallen. I mean, we've fallen very quickly. We've fallen very far in a very short period of time. But I want to talk about this level because we speculated over here that going back down to the summer lows could in fact lead to a nice bounce back up to the upside, right? So now that has actually happened, now that we've actually come down to the summer 2021 lows, we want to talk about that scenario. So currently, the 200-day moving average is coming in at around $46,000. But remember, if it is going to play out like 2018, we won't make it back to the 200-day moving average for weeks to come. Like it's likely not going to happen this week or next week or even the week after that. Okay, if it's going to happen, it probably wouldn't happen until mid to late June at the earliest. And I mean, I don't feel the best about that considering it's going into the summer and the summer doesn't really tend to be that great. But with that said, we'll continue to follow this pattern if it actually does play out. So supposing that Bitcoin gets some type of a bounce, what might it do? Well, the 200-day moving average is already starting to come down. Okay, so you can imagine it's going to continue coming down. And if it continues to come down like this and Bitcoin gets some type of a bounce, perhaps it'll come back up to this trend line sometime in June, just like it did in 2018. Okay, this is what we talked about back in 2018. So you had all of these higher lows followed by a lower low, followed by one more back test of that dubiously drawn trend line. before coming back down to the bottom of the range, which is again the summer of 2021 lows. It is my opinion that this 6K floor over here is similar to the 30K floor that we're at right now. Okay, so I think there's a lot of similarities between 6K and 30K, just from like a technical perspective. Do they have to play out the exact same way? Probably not. They probably won't. So far, they've been playing out relatively in a similar manner, but they don't actually have to play out like that the entire time. So, I think that now that the lower low is in, which is kind of a relief because I don't really like it when we're putting in these higher lows, because once you have everyone watching something, it normally breaks. Whatever you're watching, it normally breaks. So I'd rather just break it and get it over with than have to keep watching it for months on end. So it's broken now to the downside. We put in a lower low. Now the question is, do we see that relief bounce back up to $40,000? And there certainly is a reasonable chance that it could happen. Even if it does happen, if you actually go look at what happened over here in 2018, it did not happen immediately. Okay, we spent about a week in those lows. Okay, so before we actually saw some type of a bounce back up, about a week. So we just got here, right? We just got down to these lower lows now. Let's be patient, okay? I think that the right mentality right now is to be apathetic towards the market, to say, if 40K comes, it comes, and if we go back to the 200-day SMA, that's where the battle will take place by the bears. The bears will come out and try to defend that line. Okay, they will. You better believe it. I mean, if you get comfortable, that's when the bears come out again and they attack. So let's see if we get that bounce. There's one thing that sort of has me a little cautious on this. There's one thing. And that thing is, while it appears in this structure that we are in the equivalent of, say, May or June of 2018 right now, if you would just look at it like this, meaning we could have a few more months before potentially finally figuring out where the bottom is and then ultimately trending higher from there. But if you look at it a different way, and you look at it on, say, like a weekly time frame, and you look at things like, going below the 100-week moving average, you can see in 2018, once we fell below the 100-week, I mean, we just went straight to the 200. However, in 2014, we actually did sort of see that bounce that we're talking about. So I do think there is a reasonable chance that Bitcoin could see some type of a relief bounce, sometime in the next month or two, back up to the 200-day moving average. If that doesn't happen and we just simply capitulate down to the 200-week SMA, then I do think that would present a pretty nice opportunity for a lot of people. Okay, and you can look at some other things and find indicators that make it seem like we're further along in the bear market than people might actually think, especially looking at things like the weekly RSI. I mean, look at the RSI on the weekly. We're at 35. The lowest we ever reached in 2018 was like 29. The lowest we ever reached in 2014, 2015 was like 28, 29. We're already getting close to those levels. So we might actually be a couple months further along than people think we are. So I did want to, I just wanted to come on and talk about, look, we talked about this lower low potentially coming, and how when you're in a bear market type structure, you will after you getting rejected off the 200-day moving average, you will typically see a lower low. And then once you see the lower low, it changes the structure of the market. And then if we can find some demand here at these summer lows, we haven't found it yet. Some people, I've been getting messages from people saying, oh, we're back at 32K. Is this what you're talking about? Like, no one's getting out of bed for a 32K Bitcoin. Yesterday, 32K was the fear price. Now it's the FOMO price. So no one cares about 32K Bitcoin. An actual bounce would be going back to like 40K or something. Okay, so I think in the short term, we might spend a bit more time down in these lower ranges, somewhere between, say, 29K up to, let's call it 34 is kind of where I think we're probably going to spend a little bit of time. And then at that point, we'll figure out if going into June, we'll see that rally back up to the 200-day moving average, or if we end up just following a new pattern and going straight to the 200-week SMA. But I did want to follow up. I know we've followed this pattern for quite a while, and I had some people asking me about, now that we've put in the lower low, now what? Sometimes it's easy to When you're over here and you're talking about putting in a lower low, it makes sense from a from one perspective to say, all right, well, we're already at like 38, 39K. So if we drop down, $10,000, we'll likely see a bounce. Once you actually drop down $10,000, it's easy to just keep thinking it's going to drop without a bounce, which it could. But I do want to revisit prior ideas that we had before it actually happened to say, okay, now that it has come down here, let's see if we can, see some type of a similar bounce like we saw in 2018. So I kind of think, one possible thing is that we're just 1 month ahead of 2018 because 2018 we had a top in December. If this top is November, this first low here was February, but this first low here was January. And then the second low was in April, but this second low was in February/March. The 200-day rejection here was in May. This one was in late March, early April, and then the capitulation to a lower low was in June, and this one was in May. So to me, it sort of seems like we're at least 1 month ahead of this. So I would say at least 1 month ahead, could be 3 months ahead, depending on how you look at it with respect to, say, some of the weekly moving averages and going below the 100-week SMA, potentially going to the 200. But I would say we're at least 1 month ahead of where we were in 2018 in terms of the market structure, but we're upwards of 3 months ahead. Okay, so depending on how you look at it. So my preference, if I had to pick what would I prefer to happen, I would probably say I would actually prefer to see a bounce, just so it gives time for the market to adjust. I would like to see Bitcoin. I'd like to see it reclaim some dominance, but I'm growing old waiting for that. I think I have a few new gray hairs waiting for that thing to happen. So I'd like to see a bounce. Don't know if we're going to get it. If we do get it, we need to remember that the 200-day moving average is the line in the sand that we need to get back above. So even if we rally back above the 20-week moving average, like the bull market support band, it doesn't mean a thing if it doesn't have that sting, and that sting is getting back above the 200-day moving average. Okay, and then furthermore, holding the 20-week estimate as support on a potential retest. So until then, you're better off assuming it is a bear market resistance band. And by the way, that's currently coming in at just over 40K, so 40 to 41K. So you can imagine why that level could act as some type of resistance if we get a bounce back up in the coming weeks. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We have Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. You'll get access to weekly reports, 3 weekly videos, the Telegram alerts channel, the Telegram chat room, the risk dashboard, the Into the Cryptoverse app, and more. Go check it out. You can cancel it anytime. Thank you. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.